All right, today we are jumping into one of the coolest origin stories out there, the accidental birth of one of the very first video games. And trust me, it starts in a place you would never, ever expect. A government science lab.
So let me ask you, what do you think was the first video game? I bet your mind probably goes straight to something like Pong, maybe Space Invaders, right? You know, the classics. But what if I told you the real story starts much, much earlier than that? Yep. To find the true granddaddy of modern gaming, we've got to go way back. We're talking about a time when computers were these massive things that filled entire rooms, and the idea of playing a game on one was basically science fiction. This is long before a home console was even a glimmer in someone's eye. So, let's get into how this whole thing kicked off. Our story doesn't begin with some grand vision to create a new industry. Nope. It starts with a much simpler goal: trying to make a pretty dull science exhibit just a little more interesting. Okay, so picture this. The year is 1958. We're at the Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York, and it's their annual open house. This was an event designed to show the public all the amazing, and let's be honest, probably pretty dry scientific stuff they were working on.
And this is where our main character enters the scene, William Higinbotham. Now, he wasn't a game developer, he was a physicist. As the head of the instrumentation division, he took one look at the planned displays for the open house and thought, man, this is all a bit boring.
And this right here is the key to the whole story. Higinbotham just believed that science could be fun, that it should be interactive. He wanted to build something that would actually grab people's attention, an exhibit you could play with, not just stare at.
And this brings us to the absolute stroke of genius at the heart of it all. He decided to take a very serious piece of scientific equipment and give it a totally new, completely playful job.
The piece of tech in question was a Donner Model 30 analog computer. And let me be clear, this was no toy. This was a complex, sophisticated machine built to do serious calculations for serious research.
So how on earth do you get from missile science to a video game? Well, Higinbotham was just flipping through the computer's manual when he found something really cool. The machine could simulate trajectories, even calculating for things like wind resistance. And right then, a light bulb went off. He connected the dots from a bouncing missile to a bouncing ball, and a simple, brilliant idea was born: a game of tennis.
So with that idea sparked, Higinbotham and his team got to work, and what they created would eventually be known as Tennis for Two.
So what was this thing exactly? It was a pretty simple game, really. It used that big analog computer to simulate a tennis match viewed from the side on a tiny little 5-inch oscilloscope screen. It was just a glowing dot for a ball bouncing over a line for the net. But don't let that simple description fool you. For 1958, this was unbelievably advanced. Just think about it. The game had physics. It simulated gravity and air resistance. The ball could actually hit the net and bounce off. And players had these custom-made aluminum controllers with a knob and a button, which meant you could control the angle of your shot. That level of interactivity was just completely unheard of back then.
And here's the absolute kicker. A colleague of his, a technician named Robert Dvorak, took Higinbotham's blueprints and built the entire setup in about 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks to accidentally invent the video game from scratch. Incredible.
All right, so they built this weird little electronic tennis game for a science fair. How did people react? Was it just a weird little oddity, or was it something more?
It was an absolute runaway hit. Seriously, forget all the other exhibits. This was the star of the show. People, kids, adults, everyone were lining up for hours just to get a chance to play this bizarre, futuristic tennis game. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. It was so popular, in fact, that they brought it back the next year for the open house. But this time, they gave it an upgrade, a bigger screen instead of the tiny 5-inch one. And they even added new physics options, like being able to simulate gravity on the moon or Jupiter.
So this is where the story gets really fascinating, and honestly, a little bit sad. You have this invention that people are clearly going crazy for. So why on earth did it just vanish and get forgotten for decades?
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? If everybody loved it so much, why didn't the video game revolution just kick off right then and there in 1958?
Well, the answer really boils down to the mindset of the time. To the scientists at Brookhaven, computers were insanely expensive, dead serious tools for research. The very idea of using one just for fun seemed, well, frivolous, almost silly. Nobody, not even Higinbotham himself, saw any commercial potential in it.
And just stop and think about that culture shock for a second. What was a totally wild, almost unthinkable use for a computer in 1958 is now one of the main reasons people own one. The world just wasn't ready to see a computer as a toy.
And so, after its second run at the open house, the Tennis for Two machine was unceremoniously taken apart. Its parts were scavenged for other lab projects, and this incredible, pioneering invention was just set aside and completely forgotten.
And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. It wasn't until years and years later, during some patent lawsuits over Pong, that anyone even rediscovered Higinbotham's creation. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other brilliant, world-changing ideas have been born way ahead of their time, only to be left forgotten in a corner, just waiting for the rest of the world to finally catch up?